Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, good day today. Work was work, so yeah, that's work. But I got to see my daughter for a little while. She's doing an internship over here in my town. She's like a diet tech and going to be a dietitian. Getting her master's sooner or later for that. A lot of fun seeing her. And it was funny because she got out early, so I was supposed to play in a game, a Dark Age of Roleplay game, at 3 o'clock my time, 1 o'clock his time, because he put out a thing, I think yesterday, saying, hey, is anybody up for playing this really impromptu session of basic fantasy roleplay game with, maybe a couple of house rules? And today, at like 1 o'clock his time. And so I said, yeah, sure. And, so I ended up putting it off until about like 3:30 or 4 my time, which I guess 1:30 his time, because I met my daughter and we hung out. But that was cool because that gave time for the other player, Josh James, to make a character and get up to speed. And it's really cool to play with Josh too, because he's somebody like I'm friends with on Facebook. I've interacted with him off and on through like the RPG Brigade and a couple other Facebook groups. Role-playing game Facebook groups, and I think he may have commented on some videos of mine or what have you. But somebody I've known but not really known, so it's really neat to put a voice and a personality with that face and with the typing. And so it was a great time, the three of us playing. And Jason actually played a couple NPCs, which really helped round out the party rather, in terms of like role playing. Not so much in terms of like our ability to handle things, but the role playing. And most of the session was role playing, and it was an absolute hoot. So this video isn't about that mostly, but I want to talk a little bit about I guess I call it like in character versus out of character experience. And I've talked about this before. I've been thinking about this lately. Angel Drunfoot's actually put up a post in the RPG Brigade. We talked about similar issues in a couple other groups. About different preferences or wanting to have like a theme in your game, and we talked about trying different, for lack of a better term, different creative agendas, different playstyle preferences, things that are different than what we normally like or gravitate towards. And there's no reason we can't try that and see how much we like it or not like it. And I'm sure we can have I can have a fun time playing games that aren't really my thing. I just don't want to play them all the time. But part of that for me is the in-character versus out-of-character experience. And I don't necessarily mean just that we're going to talk in character and not have out-of-character discussions. What I really mean is like for lack of a better word, the creative agenda, to steal the term from the big model, that I really gravitate towards, focuses on a really in-character experience. In other words, like even today, I'm playing this, admittedly kind of lighthearted, sort of surfacey, game of basic fantasy role-playing game. But as I'm playing Phineas, my character, and as Josh is playing his guy, I believe Demure, is how he pronounced his name. It was fun. Like we became our characters. At least I became Phineas, and I discovered more and more about what made this guy tick. I had a basic idea as I created him of what he was kind of like, and then as the game goes on, like I discovered more of his motivations. What would he do in this particular situation? But the entire experience for me was based on, what would he do? What would Phineas actually do in the situation? And there were times that he acted in ways which are completely contrary to what made sense, because he was so delusional. And there's other times that he actually let his common sense get the better of him and saved his own hide, and probably everybody else's hide too, and didn't venture into areas that he really shouldn't have, or pretty much actually retreated from areas that he realized I'm in over my head at this point. And there were times, sure, that I had a bit of an out-of-character experience and realized, from a gamey kind of standpoint or a metagamey standpoint, what am I dealing with here? But I believe that's something that, based on the actual die rolls that happen in the game, where Phineas realized, based on his lore ability, for lack of a better word, he kind of knew what he was looking at a particular moment and realized that this is a very bad thing based on all the research he's done. We're really in over our heads. We should leave now. So I don't even think it was really an out-of-character experience at that point. It was an in-character experience for Phineas, because there were another time when he completely botched that lore roll, and so he had no idea what he was dealing with. And he just, he tried all kinds of stuff. But he was, once again, he was behaving in character. There are other creative agendas, other playstyle preferences, which for me, and people have kind of talked about this. People a lot smarter than me kind of promote more of an out of character experience, and some of that is that very tactical method where you're really kind of playing your characters in an optimal rather manner, where you're kind of looking, you're looking over, what is my character doing? What is your character doing? What is this particular obstacle or monster or challenge we're facing? What's the optimal thing to do here? Should we retreat, from a kind of tactical standpoint, or should we gang up here? And what is our mathematical advantage going to be? At that point, I played games like that, and it can be fun. I had a lot of fun playing in like an Aliens game. It was like literally, the scene in the reactor room. A lot of fun. It's a little miniatures game and what have you, but it is very tactical, and that's not something I want to do all the time because that's a very out of character experience. When we played these characters, we kind of played them up from how they were presented in the movie a little bit. We said some quotes and whatnot when I played with my friends down the street, but it was a very out of character experience, and it can be just like that in some role playing games, and that's really not it's not my favorite experience. And likewise, you can have a very out of character experience in terms of like wanting to create a particular theme or story arc or a particular character arc, or this is what we want to explore in the game. And the decision, and I'm not saying this is bad. This is arguably one of the more popular play styles. But for me, it presents this very out of character experience because I'm no longer playing Phineas. I'm playing like what would be the most dramatic, what would make the optimal story, what would be the coolest thing to do here, and actually what would create interesting complications in this scenario. And there's two things I've been one thing I've been participating in, and a couple games I've been looking at that I haven't actually played yet, which I really want to play, which kind of promote experiences like that to a certain extent. I've been looking at Fate an awful lot, and also like Powered by the Apocalypse games. And I want to talk about those games in separate videos. And I'm not saying anything bad about them, but there's some like, say we'll take Fate for example. You can fail in various different ways, but oftentimes when you fail, you pretty much take like an interesting complication. Like you're a failure. You might succeed a little bit. You might get part of what you want, which can also happen in Powered by the Apocalypse. But let's come up with this interesting complication. Which complication would make the story more interesting at this particular point? I can tell you in real life, and I'm not knocking these games at all. In real life, I don't want interesting complications. I'm not looking for interesting complications in my real life. I hope to succeed every frickin' time. And when I fail, failure hurts. When I have consequences for behavior that I shouldn't have engaged in, or just behavior that I mistakenly engaged in, that's subversive. I don't want to experience those consequences again. That's why they're called consequences. I'm not looking for an interesting consequence or interesting drama in my real life because, I don't want any drama in my real life. Now, I understand when we go into a game experience, they tend to be about conflict. Like I mentioned a couple of videos back in Emulating Fiction, most of the situations we find ourselves in role-playing games are a little bit horrible. They are. We have decided already to have some interesting complications in the beginning. We've entered this scenario where there are going to be interesting complications, where there's going to be motivations or what have you, or the game master is going to provide us with a scenario, or whatever's going on, where there is an interesting complication. My character's goal at that point, the way I play, is I want to avoid any more interesting complications. I want to achieve whatever my goals are and get the hell out of there alive, or with whatever I want, or you know what I mean? Just the way I approach real life. Real life will throw interesting complications at you anyway. I don't want to create any more. Like I said, not knocking that kind of game, but that's not necessarily what I'm looking for. And that can be a very out of character experience because you're sitting there thinking, like, what would the interesting complication be here? Now, a real life example, so to speak, I've been playing a Song of Ice and Fire role-playing game that Tim Harper, the Samwise 7 RPG, has been running, and that's been fun. It's been a slow-moving game, but it's been fun, and it's cool because I always enjoy like a play-by-post sort of game. And I've been playing with some people that have some different play styles and some, probably focus a little bit more on a more narrative, creative agenda, for lack of a better term. And they're kind of setting up some scenes like what can we do here? What would be an interesting conflict for us to have, or some interesting duplicitous stuff to be going on? Which it is. It's based on Game of Thrones, which I have no experience with, except I know it's all about backstabbing and being duplicitous and all kinds of levels of subterfuge and intrigue and what have you. So that game kind of lends itself to being approached in that manner. So I mean, literally, I've sat down over the internet with another player, and stop playing my character so much in terms of like what would Sigurd do. And very recently just had a conversation with another player. Okay, what would be kind of a cool thing to do here? So we are kind of hovering over our characters. We're having this out of character experience. Let's create this interesting scene. Let's create this interesting and intriguing moment, and let's have some other stuff up our sleeves. But it's not so much. It's not just what our characters want. It's what would be really cool. What would be really dramatic. What would be really kind of unexpected happening here at that point. That's fun. And so I'm deciding, I've acquiesced, like, let me experience what this is actually like and not fight it, and play the game in that manner and interact with the other players some more on a, out of character, I won't say metagame because that's the wrong word, but just kind of hovering over the field of play and deciding what kind of scene are we going to set up here. But that's not my preferred style of play. So in both those other, two extremes, not extremes, but different agendas. Whether it's going to be something where it's much more tactical, or whether we're trying to set a particular mood or a particular scenario or a particular theme or a particular arc or an idea. Let's make something really cool. Let's create some interesting consequences or some interesting tension and drama. That's not necessarily a play style that I gravitate towards naturally. Naturally, when I sit down for a game, I find myself playing Phineas. Playing Cervantes, playing, Philippe Moreau, playing, whatever character I end up playing, Duras the Wizard. I end up playing the character and trying to stay out of those interesting consequences. And as much as possible, not hovering over the game field, the playing field or whatever you want to call it, and, thinking what would be the most tactically advantageous thing for me to do here. I've done that, but I find I have much more fun playing like, what would my character do in this particular situation? What is this world really like? What would really go on in this particular situation? How would Phineas act? So I don't know if that made any sense to you, but it made sense to me. But I had a great time, in that little fun game today, and that just made me think of this. So I decided I'd make a video. The end.